we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, wherever you're watching, please make sure to rate the podcast wherever you are. If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, like our channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share as much as you can. Again, tell a friend. If you tell one friend, we can double the podcast overnight. If you did want to ever reach out to us for anything, don't be afraid to reach out to us on our Twitter or Instagram at the Bigmark Pod or at the Bigmark Podcast, at our DMs. Hit us up in there. And then if you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/the Bigmark Podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening. This is episode 92. It's the countdown to 100. And I'm really looking forward to it. And, I was thinking about what I was going to do for the topic today, and it just kind of came to me a little bit. I want to talk about, something that I've, been doing and I'm been very intimate with. Let's just put it that way, for a few years now, and something I kind of wanted to share with you guys. And, the title of the episode is bass, which is maybe the bass, but it's a little bit of a broad subject, don't get me wrong, but hopefully listening, I kind of narrow things down a little bit more. I kind of talk a little bit more about my journey, and then, artists that have influenced me, and, famous bass players, and, all these different things, but I kind of want to bring it all together. Anyway, let's get into it. Like I said, I kind of wanted to start where all things started for me as far as the bass is concerned. Obviously I've loved music my whole life, and, I've really enjoyed getting to know music. And it's funny. I look back, and I was just thinking about this the other day. It's been a long time since I felt like I've listened to music as a non-musician kind of thing. Not trying to pick things apart, not thinking of the key and how things work together, and the inspiration that comes and what I would like to do with it. Not that it's a selfish thing, I want to try and rip people off, but it's this thing where, it goes for anyone who has looked behind the curtain of a lot of things, or really delved behind specific skills or trades or whatever. Look at a lot of people who build houses. As soon as they walk in a house, they can't help but, look around and, see all the flaws and or really nice things too, right? It's not all about critique, but again, you can't help but kind of pick things apart. And I miss those days, and those days kind of changed, not only when my pops handed me a guitar when I was 9, and I started learning then, but first year of high school, at least here in Ontario and up here in Canada, we, you're required to do an art credit. So in grade 9, you can do visual art. You can do, I think, drama was the other one, or music. So I chose music, of course. I love music, and I was playing guitar a little bit. I really, I started playing guitar when I was 9. And then kind of drifted away from it a little bit, but really picked it up in grade 8, coming out of grade 8. My buddy Will Montour down the street was into guitar. I got really back into it, got into electric guitar a little bit more. So then when high school hit and I'm doing my art credit in music, you get to choose the instrument you want to do. And I decided to go with the bass because I'm like, oh, okay, let's make things easy here, right? This is these are, I think it was in my first semester of grade 9 too. So it's the first few days of grade 9, let's try and keep things simple here, right? So I went with the bass. It's a fretted instrument. I thought, okay, it's 2 less strings. It might even be easier. And immediately kind of fell in love with it. It seemed to come, somewhat naturally. Obviously, I was learning through the curriculum and things like that. Learned on electric bass, and then also learned how to play double bass. It was super fun. And then honestly, grade 9 happened. I got my credit, and I kept going. And, at the time I don't think I was leaning towards being like a full-fledged doctor, but I was already leaning towards, medical sciences, some type of that kind of like human dealing with people in some way, in a medical format. I don't know what the fuck. Anyway, in grade 10 at least, I was, doing all kinds of different credits in my like, whatever the, oh my gosh, can't believe I can't remember the word. Anyway, the extra courses that you can kind of throw around. I was able to kind of throw those around my. Anyway, I'm sure someone's screaming at the TV or the radio or whatever listening to this, but you know what I'm talking about. Those extra courses that you get to throw around that aren't mandatory. You get to kind of have fun with them. And I did like fitness and like gym and shit like that. And then in grade 10, I did construction, like wood shop, because you're allowed to. It was great. I had a lot of fun, and my schedule was full. I couldn't keep doing music. So I was bummed, but oh well, you keep going. Then, grade 11's rolling around, and our conductor of the jazz band in high school, who was also my music teacher in grade 9, Mr. Jones, he came up to me and he's like, Mark, like, would you be interested in playing in the jazz band? Like, we need a bass player. And I was, there was like this course he wanted me to go in, but I had to have taken grade 10 music to get to this course. And I'm like, sir, I don't have the credit, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, if you do a playing test, you can actually skip grade 10 and go right into it. So, I did a performance test for him. And, in grade 11, I was able to fit that into my schedule. And the last class of the day was this jazz course, and everyone but one dude, sorry, Kale, but there was this one dude, everyone in that class, all but one, were in this jazz band, and it was like the jazz band of our high school. It was awesome. I think there was about 15 of us all together, honestly, give or take. But there was a good amount of us, and it was super cool. Obviously bass, drums, horn section, trumpets, trombone, baritone sax, alto sax, tenor sax, alto sax. We had some John on the bongos, unreal. Myself on bass. We also had Albert Van Sandhort on. He was on the double bass, so we had two bass players, and then we had our boy Joe McKee on tuba. So I always used to joke that it was like Wagner put together a jazz band, because the low end was it was like really bassy band. And then my boy Justin Bonjay on drums, and in fact his brother Matt Bonjay was on tenor sax, Frank Despond on baritone sax, and then also my boy Eric Persicini was one of our trumpet players, whatever. We all played in bands together over the years in high school, right? So this is what happens, right? You play in jazz band, and you go and like, let's play like rock music. And we did some covers the first time I was ever on stage. Just not in the jazz band, was with guys from said band. It was super great. And it was super fun to do the jazz band stuff too. We'd go around to different schools, like all the feeder schools for my high school, St. Mary's in Hamilton. We went to all these different schools and and we would do like the concert for kids. The when you're in grade school, that little concert that you get taken out of the class for, all of a sudden everyone's in the gym sitting down, and there's just random band starts playing. That was us, and it was so fun. And there was I can't recall how many we went to that year, but tons. And like, you get taken out of school, blah, blah, blah. And I was used to that, obviously, with sports and things. And it was an interesting juxtaposition for myself, being an athlete all those years up until grade 11. starting senior teams, getting a little bit more serious about sports, but then being able to play music, I was very fortunate. Actually, one of the funniest parts, or the best part to me about, one of the greatest experience I ever had about being on the jazz band and playing basketball, was they overlap slightly, the jazz band season, if you will, and basketball. And there was this one, like, I honestly, I can't tell you how many times it happened, but I always remember this one time. Again, like I said, it was the last period of class. We'd have this jazz class, and then we'd go right into jazz band practice. And usually the senior team, my basketball team, would practice, like around 6:37, I think we used to start. Anyway, one time, we're doing this thing, and I think we had to practice a little bit early for basketball. And I wore my practice jersey underneath a t-shirt while I was in jazz band, had everything ready, I even had my shoes on. While I was, playing bass in the jazz band, we're going through it. We do our little practice. I put the jazz bass down, and in my high school, the music hallway, or the music room, opened right up, and across the hall with the lockers and everything across the hall was the entrance to our gym. So I literally walked out through one doors, walked out through the others, caught a shot, and swished it. Well, I don't know if I swished it, but I got the ball and took a shot. And it was just, again, that meeting of the two things is always really special to me, because I think that's kind of just like a nice little, kind of nutshell, of my life, a little kind of snapshot, if you will, of those two things meeting. And it's interesting, right? Like, sports, I've talked about it a lot, obviously, on this podcast. Sports you are performing in a way, right? So there is a performance aspect, not to say that every athlete is a showman, but you're almost always doing it in front of people. Yeah, there's practice and all that shit, but fuck, even when you get to certain levels, people want to watch you practice too. So it's a performance art, right? So I never really saw there was a big kind of gap with that. But anyway, not to digress too much away from that, but learning and cutting my chops playing bass in the jazz band, it was really special, not only for my bass playing, but also just learning how to be in a band. When you're playing with like 15 people, you can't really, you have to understand dynamics. You have to understand give and take. When someone's soloing, you better fucking play quiet, because if 15 people are all playing at their normal level, it doesn't matter if that person's amplified, doesn't matter if that person's playing as loud as they can, they're gonna get drowned out. So again, being mindful of your bandmates, and then obviously playing bass and learning how to really be one with my drummer. Again, shout out Justin Bonjay. Our conductor really instilled in us that we had to forge this bond between each other. Because again, especially in jazz, we were playing mostly big band jazz. It's not like we were playing crazy Miles Davis, but we, at some points in jazz, at any point really, sometimes the bass is carrying the rhythm, and sometimes the drums are the beat, or whatever, however you want to look at it. But sometimes, because the nature of jazz, you're able to kind of explore a little bit more. Sometimes the bass has to kind of carry things. And I really learned, again, just how important those things are, not only to any band, but ours in particular. And that really kind of just set the groundwork for how I kind of approach things later. Obviously took a little bit of a break with university. We tried to be in some bands in university. Actually, in one band we almost started, which was really cool. Andrew Eschinger, actually, was a guitar player and was going to play in another band. He was going to play bass in our band. And that was almost one of those things that kind of triggered in my mind. Like, again, obviously, if you know how to play multiple instruments, who cares? Play in multiple bands. Like, go for it. Who cares? What's the difference? And play different instruments in different bands. So, the seeds get planted. I was really lucky to see Protest the Hero here in Hamilton, and a riff. Sorry if I bastardize your last name, man. I'm so sorry. I have a fucking long ass name that no one can pronounce either, but bear with me. Arif Mira Dolbagi, and he's this amazing bass player, and fuck, his energy was wild. I saw them at McMaster in their like underground kind of bar. And just fantastic, so energetic, and like he stole the show kind of thing. It was like the only guy I could watch, even though the rest of the band was shredding. He just like drew my attention so much, and I was like, wow. I didn't really realize, like, you don't always think the bass player is going to be like the kind of almost not front man, but just like usually the guitar player you kind of imagine is going to be kind of wild and doing his thing. And then actually, while I was still in university, this is like right after I got my shoulder surgery, actually, me, my boy Lep, and a couple other boys, we went to go see Alexis on Fire's like last show, even though I just saw them recently again. But at the time, their last show here in Hamilton, and Chris Steele, their bass player, it was the first time I had ever seen them, and I was really happy to see them again. But the first time I'd ever seen them, and I didn't realize how absolutely captivating their bass player is, Chris Steele, again. Absolutely amazing. He just exudes this energy. Again, it's all about this energy, but just the excitement, and you just see the passion. And again, like I said, bass is a really interesting thing, because scientifically speaking, that's actually what people like kind of dance to. You don't really dance to just like the beat. Obviously the drums are doing shit and getting after it, but the rhythm is kind of what you dance to, and that I always look at when I approach the bass, that it's this glue between the rhythm and the melody, right? And you're kind of weaving in between. You can play melodic notes, but you're also, responsible for dealing with the rhythm and the beat. So again, that's how I've kind of always looked at it. And again, you're kind of setting the tone for what people are grooving to. As when you talk about a groove, that's what people are grooving to. And you're almost like, I saw in these two guys that it's almost like you're kind of showing people where that groove is by moving to it. Obviously, they can find their own groove by listening to it. But if you're out there moving, you're almost setting an example of getting people to go. And I always have taken that, I hope, in my playing, where I can't not move when I'm playing, and I want to bring people in, and I want to do it with people, because again, as much as you're playing music for yourself, when you're on stage, it's fucking for the people. So I will tear my heart out if I could, and show people that this is for them in a way that if you can find some solace, if you can find escape, if you can find joy, peace, happiness, whatever it might be from these songs and the experience of live music, then we've all done our jobs as musicians, and we are simultaneously experiencing that with people. And again, that's kind of how I've always approached my performances anyway. I kind of want to talk about a couple of the basses I have, not really go into things, because obviously not everyone is watching this on YouTube, but I only have a couple. Honestly, I have a sweet 2007 Epiphone Thunderbird. That was the bass I used in the jazz band. 2008 Rickenbacker 4003 in Maple Glow, which was kind of my first like serious bass. Again, sorry not to nerd out too much about this, but hopefully everyone's listening loves a little bit of action. And it's always interesting with instruments, and I've probably mentioned this before. Musical instruments are amazing because they on their own are beautiful, right? You can look at a guitar, you can look at a bass and say, wow, look at the craftsmanship and everything that's gone into it. And the fact that it's also a practical instrument, you can make music with it, I think is also so fascinating. And when I was kind of getting a little bit more serious about playing, I also wanted to have an instrument that was going to kind of keep up with me, and I'm not going to have to really worry about it if I ding it off something. It's a bit of a paradox because obviously you have to pay a lot for musical instruments and you don't want to treat them like trash, but things happen on the road. So you kind of have to kind of give into it. So I bought this 2013 Fender Standard P bass, which is beautiful. It's in red cola, like candy cola, which is kind of like a beautiful sparkly red that I put this sweet like shiny white pickguard on. Anyway, it's my kind of road bass, if you will, all purpose. I love it. I think it's a great bass. Hopefully eventually get a Music Man Stingray or a jazz bass. Again, those are kind of dream wish list ones, but depending on the bands you play in, right? Like that's the biggest thing, is sometimes the bands you play in kind of dictate the instrument you're going to play, right? And I also wanted to I wanted to kind of get into some of the bass players that are out there that, again, these are one of these things where you don't really know about some of these bass players because they don't really get the credit. I want to go into this a little bit in depth in a second, but there's stereotypes around bass players, and they're always kind of like they usually tend to be the unsung heroes. Obviously, there's some famous ones that I'm about to mention, but a lot of your favorite bands, you might know the lead singer, you might know the guitar player's name, but not a lot of times you know the drummer and the bass player's names, right? Within the rhythm section is one of the most important things of the band, right? Some of the great bass players of all time, Tony Levin, playing with Peter Gabriel and King Crimson, absolutely amazing. Tony Levin's work on Peter Gabriel his album So, absolutely fantastic bass playing. Obviously, Paul McCartney from the Beatles, you can't go wrong. Pino Palladino, one of my personal influences, played with John Mayer Trio and The Who. I've seen him live playing with both, and countless other bands. He's well sought after these days, and like I said, one of my influences not only in his sound but in his bass as well. He plays a P bass as well with flat wound strings, which I have. Gives a certain tone. This is what I like, and this is what Pino Palladino did. It's also what Roger Waters did from Pink Floyd. He also on Dark Side of the Moon played a P bass with flat wounds and a pick specifically to get that sound. Anyway, I love that. I love both their playing. Roger Waters, again, not always name checked as one of the best bass players because he wasn't doing wild shit, but I think he's up there as one of my favorites. Definitely a huge influence on me. And what he did in Pink Floyd, obviously kind of set the tone for how I like to play, pun intended. Geddy Lee from Rush, obviously can't go wrong. The guy shredded and sang at the same time and played fucking keyboards with his feet. Absolutely amazing. Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, absolutely can't go wrong. Rick Danko, one of a big influence for me from the band. Bass playing. When you sing and play bass, it's really difficult. I found playing guitar and singing is totally different. I kind of learned how to play guitar that way, so maybe I'm biased, but again, I think playing guitar and singing, you're kind of more on that melody side of things. But when you're playing bass and singing, you kind of really have to split your brain. It's a little bit like singing and playing drums too, but you really have to kind of split your brain and just kind of let one half do one and one half do the other. And Rick Danko from the band, big influence musically, big influence on our band. The Reckless Harbor, one of our songs, Atlantic City, our covers we do is actually written by Bruce Springsteen, but the band covers it and does a fantastic job. Chris Squire from Yes, shout out Sam Palmieri if you're listening. He's a absolute killer. I'm so happy I was able to see them here in Hamilton. It was tough to hear about his passing, but a great bass player, absolutely legendary in the prog rock scene, and had a very distinct way of playing his bass. And he also played a Rickenbacker like the one I have. John Paul Jones, of course, from Led Zeppelin. You can't have a list without John Paul Jones on it. And he was a multi-instrument musician as well. So it's always beautiful to see, people kind of branch out. And again, just because you kind of maybe learned on one instrument doesn't mean you can't, shine on another, right? I've loved guitar. I wish I could shred like Jimi Hendrix. I don't put the time in to learn necessarily, but I put the time in the bass and I love it. again, there's something that comes naturally to it. I have, and I've inherited it from my pops because he has the same thing. I have a really good rhythm. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I can keep the beat really well, and I've seen it when I do like studio shit, and I'm kind of like right on the fucking computer, like bang on. So again, that really suits bass. I mean, it's great for all musician, any instrument, I should say, but it really suits bass. Again, I don't, not to toot my own horn, I'm my own fucking podcast. What am I talking about? But again, I love bass and it comes naturally. So I'm going with it because that's what you do. Jaco Pastorius, obviously you cannot go without mentioning the great Jaco Pastorius. If you've never heard of him, go find some of his music, listen to it. He has absolutely amazing stuff. He is the king of bass, really. John Entwistle from the original lineup of The Who, absolutely amazing. Goes to show you why Pino Palladino is so great. He was able to fill his shoes, but John Entwistle almost played the bass like a guitar, and he just shredded it, and he was all over the place, breaking rules left and right about how you should really play the bass, and he's a great example of how things are done. And maybe the top of the list just happens to be at the end, but James Jamerson, probably one of the best bass players you've never heard of, and that's a sad thing because you probably have heard his bass playing. You might not have heard his name, but I'm talking the bass player on My Girl. Heard it through the grapevine. What's going on? Basically, all the Motown records that were coming out in the 60s was James Jamerson. He influenced Paul McCartney. He influenced the people that are great bass players that are alive today and alive back in the 70s and 80s. That's James Jamerson. And his playing is absolutely fantastic. So smooth. Just absolutely perfect. He always plays like the perfect notes. And it's so cool to listen to him. Again, go search all those guys I just mentioned. Search them out. Find the bands that they're in. Again, I could have mentioned a million different bass players tonight, but these are just a few I chose tonight. Again, I mentioned it earlier. Bass players kind of have a stereotypical thing. It's kind of like any band member, individual from any band tend to have certain stereotypes, right? But the bass player, usually is the tall person, has to always, argue with the guitar player about what's going to happen, how you're going to write the songs. That's just kind of like again, people fall into stereotypes, and that's where I fall into. And I've tended to do that my whole life. I was a center in basketball. I played goalie whenever there was a goalie that was required, offensive lineman, and it just naturally led me to bass player. And that's always kind of been my role. And it's funny that all those things tend to kind of have a theme. When things are going really well, no one notices until you do something wrong, and then you're the center of attention. Football, for instance. Oh yeah, everything's good. Quarterback, yay, throwing the ball. Running back, yay, making touchdowns. All of a sudden, someone gets tackled. Oh, the offensive line sucks. The offensive line let that guy through. Blah blah blah. So when everything's good, no one knows. But when everything's bad, everyone's blaming you, and yet you are crucial to the functioning. Take a goalie or again a bass player, part of a band. You're crucial to the functioning of the band or whatever you're doing, but sometimes you get not necessarily looked over, but it's just not one of those things that come up first. Everyone's, oh, the lead singer, great. Oh, the guitar playing, oh, amazing. Again, musicians are the first people, though. It's just like sports. The real athletes and the coaches, they see what's important. Any coach that I ever had in football, the first thing or people that they care about most was the offensive line. Again, knowing how to use your center in basketball is so important because what you can do from that center out, literally, you can create so many things. But again, just the people with the esoteric knowledge understand how important it is. But on the whole, it's just kind of one of those things. right? And, you know, people want to move, like I mentioned before. It's scientifically proven. People want to move to the bass, and I'm grateful that I'm able to play. I'm excited. I think it's amazing. I love playing in the band I'm in. I hope I play in other bands forever. Again, this is the best thing ever. And again, it just really fits my personality. And the thing I kind of want to leave with is think about playing a role. A lot of people want to be the best, or they want to get to the head of the thing. They want to lead. But sometimes you got the best way that you can set an example, the best way that you can actually contribute to whatever you're part of. And if you don't think you're a part of a team, in some aspect in your life, you're part of a team. Whether it's your family, whether it's at work, whether it's with whoever you're with, you're a part of a team. And when you're doing that kind of stuff, you have to understand that someone has to play a role. You can't always lead. Someone has to, pass the ball to someone to take the shot. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you got to set the screen to open things up. Sometimes you got to make the block. Sometimes you got to play the right note that sets the stage and sets the scene for that lead to shine through. And it's a special thing. And it's no less special than the people who do lead and people who do score the touchdowns, the people who do have the solos. It just relates to everything in life, that the more you try and just do your own thing and go away from the pack, the less we're all working together to lift that load together. Because when we're all lifting at the same time together, we can lift mountains, and we can do anything, and that goes on any team. If you're able to put your ego aside for a second and really just accept, and it's not just about following blindly and doing anything else. It's active participation in the team, playing your role. I've mentioned football, mentioned a million times. It's a sport where basically everyone on the field is doing something different. In Canadian football, all 12 guys on the field have different responsibilities at any time. If any one of those guys don't do their job, or something happens, or a mistake is made, or the other team capitalizes, things break down. But when everyone does everything right and they're in the right place at the right time and things click, it is a beautiful thing. Same thing with music. When everyone is just playing amazing and the dynamics are right, you enter that flow state and it's amazing. And I think that's truly possible in life. I think wherever we are, again, when we accept that we're a part of something bigger, and that's just for the moments that we're like, if it's work, just for the moments where you're actually working, but really diving into it and just allowing yourself to just be a part of this whole moment and say, I'm a part of a team which is bigger than myself, and there's interactions that maybe we can't even put into words, but there's something where there's unspoken connections between everyone, and everyone's doing their job. You're almost thinking with one mind. That truly happens, again, when we really accept the role and play it. And I think that goes for any bass player out there. It goes for anyone who is out there doing anything. I think that's something that's really, really highlighted, playing that. And that's where I want to leave it today. Again, thank you so much for listening. If you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast, feel free. DM us anytime. Twitter, Instagram, at the Bigmark Pod, at the Bigmark Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, share the video. Wherever you're listening, share the podcast. I know it's on Apple, I know it's on Spotify, but wherever you're listening, share it. And if you can, give us a 5-star review. It means a lot to us. And it really helps us push the podcast forward. Leave a review if you'd like as well. And again, if you ever wanted to donate to the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Thank you so much for listening. I love you all. Go play bass. Peace.